What if China dumped all of their US dollars tomorrow? What if the world's reserve currency was no longer the US dollar? These two things were discussed by Janet Yellen right now, and I need to bring you the details of that. My name is David Quintieri, and what I do here at this channel, I take all these complicated things, I spend hours a day, and then I break those down into real, easy, and simple ways. I've written two books about this subject, and I can get into the details as much as you like, and today, the most serious thing that I have seen is what Janet Yellen had talked about. Let's break it down. First thing, what if this would actually occur? That China, who holds the second largest out of any group, out of any country in the world, the second largest holders of treasuries. So that's US debt, effectively US dollars. And the Congress was asking Janet Yellen some questions. One of those questions was, because of some circumstance, maybe it's something with Taiwan or maybe another reason, China and the US go head to head. It's like a war. And they say, we're going to dump all of our US dollars all at once. What would the Treasury do? And she immediately responded by saying, we don't have any plans on testing that and so on, but we'd be able to react. And essentially what they're talking about here is that the Federal Reserve, primarily, the government itself can do a few things, but the Federal Reserve would have to monetize the debt immediately. So it would create monetary inflation almost instantaneously. That would be something we haven't seen in a while, where that much gets created out of thin air in such a short instance, and it is direct because one country selling it, you can't simply find another buyer immediately. It's not possible. So that is a potential, and if one country like China does it, Russia's already done that. I mean, didn't have as much as China has now. They got rid of their treasuries. The market can absorb that. Maybe, Americans could do that. If their interest rates remain high, they're attractive globally. But if their interest rates start to fall, they're not so attractive. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But understand the serious implications of this. That isn't the only one, though. We've got to talk about the second thing. I just wanted you to get across the fact that this is a very real possibility. That congressman then said to Janet Yellen, I think you should be testing this. I think you should be preparing. And so that's my message to you as well. Having currency, when you have this, spread out, when you're not so focused on one thing in one currency, you're actually diversified. And I mean that for real. The word diversification is such a terrible word today. I'm talking about real diversification. If you live in one place, work in one place, all your income comes from one place, you are relying on one thing, you've got your retirement account, your 401k, your stocks, like it's so super concentrated, you're basically hoping that within your lifetime, you're not going to experience a wild event that does occur at least once in everybody's lifetime, if you just go back. You're basically hoping that I'm going to just make it through and where my years are, there's not going to be a problem. Can you get away with that? That's up to you to decide. I would say to have some diversification, especially where your income is coming from. That's important. And now I want to look at the second thing. Before I do, if you found value in this, hit that thumbs up button because it really does help out a lot. These videos aren't shared through the algorithm unless you hit that button. Thank you very much. Now, the second thing is basically talking about the US dollar as its own reserve currency compared with the others. So Congress, again, asking the question, saying, what's happening here with the US dollar, the reserve currency, and essentially getting into the question like, what's the deal? What's happening? So what she said was that over a long period of time, the US dollar will represent less and less of the total share of reserves. That is what she said. What have I been saying for literally years? I've been saying over time, we're going to see that these countries are going to be using the dollar less and less and less. As the BRICS nations continue to expand, as their population, as their influence, as their GDP and GDP growth all expand, that is going to have a direct correlation to what happens with the reserves. Now, as it stands today, the US dollar reserves globally are still the number one by far. It's something along the lines of, let's say, 59 to 58%, somewhere in that range. That number has continuously, on average, declined every single year for many years. So we know that that's the case and it's coming down. She acknowledged that, and I think you should as well. It is very clear to see the trend, and you don't want to lose out on that. You could see as the US dollars are coming down, other currencies are starting to pick up in a sense. The Chinese currency, it is still a very small percentage. However, the expectation is that in August, we're going to hear about a BRICS currency. That BRICS currency could then accelerate the pace at which we've been seeing, which is taking a long time. And I still think even with a new BRICS currency, it is going to take a long time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that tomorrow everything's going to change. But if you want to know exactly what's going to happen in August, I'm going to break that down from each angle and each thing. Make sure you subscribe. I'm going to give you the details you need to know, and I'll leave out the fluff. Trust me. You can see it here for yourself. When we look at the reserve currency status, that changes over a period. It doesn't happen overnight. And so for everybody, they've got to be aware of this. What you can do about this whole situation, the two things that I talked about today. Very first thing is you need currency diversification. How do you do that? If you have an online business, you can have customers all around the world. Maybe things aren't so good in the area where you live, but maybe in a different country they are okay, and you can get your your income from there as well. Maybe it's only 10% of your total. Okay, out of the total that you're getting from this other place, but that's okay. That's great. That's 10% that you didn't have before. That's one thing, but also at the same time, you need self-sufficiency and preparedness as a backup. Very important. This is what I talk about, the pillars of prosperity. And for a lot of people, if you just simply prepare, that means having a beautiful garden in your backyard. That means maybe solar panels or geothermal. That means having all the preparations in place, just like a rainy day fund. People having the cash in their house, in their safe, in the, keeping it in the bank, whatever it is. For you, the individual, you got to be aware of these things. You got to take the steps, take those actions today before it's too late. I hope you found this informative. Of course, if you did, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.